Exactly as I start, I realize there are no captions enabled. And just as I start, the dogs need to start barking also. This is big comedy. This is big. This is the big. Um, okay, here we are. The only problem is it is going to start lagging as always because having subtitles is something only for the rich, I guess. I don't know. Uh, in this case, I might have one too many things open for the sake of having them open, really. So I I guess I can try to close a little bit of stuff in that sense. Perhaps I can, but it doesn't change the fact that indeed I I can't run the captions at the same time as anything else really because it doesn't work when I try to do so. But yeah, that is part of the contract, I guess. Um, that is the understandable reality of this. I would even go as far as to say, but anyways, here we are. Uh, Yet another day that we have survived or something like that. Here we find ourselves again after this time after not such a long break, but yeah, after a while, still we are so back. That yeah, it is interesting to see that we have returned, that we are indeed present. Let's say it like that, easier. But yeah, I don't know. We're already lagging. We are already so rapidly lagging. Oh yeah, I don't really know what could be a proper fix for the subtitles making generating so much lag. I guess I don't have an explanation. I mean, I guess the problem is because I never tried to learn how to code something like this. Now it has become a problem. That's the biggest reality out that. Sadly, nothing else. I should have tried to learn, but I never cared about that until now. So I guess it is but the consequence of my own actions. Yet again, anyways, completely anyways. I will do as always. The moment in which it starts to lag too much, I simply turn them off. And also, I have been checking. It seems they even turn themselves off for a while when they start to crash and when they start to have some problems with, I guess, OBS or the RAM. I don't know exactly what, but yeah, they solve themselves. They sort themselves out. But it is better when I do it by hand because if not, it takes too much and it, yeah, the FPS drop too low for me to stay comfortable in that sense. So yeah, anyways, completely understandable, I guess, completely normal, and simply wanted to say that I am subtitles, my beloved, but no, today we're here again after after not so long, and I don't know. I guess before saying that, I something incredibly funny happened. I think it was like 5 minutes ago. for 5 minutes before I started, I wanted to go live exactly 5 minutes before that, and just as I tried to hit the go live button, my dogs immediately started to go incredibly crazy, but like to the point of um, crying like dogs do and whatnot. And it has become also incredibly funny to go and tell them to shut up because they already know that they are doing something bad by the moment in which I simply am myself present there, let's say. And it is always funny because I don't even know if it is like the biggest type of coincidence or it only happens like it starts to signal to me, yeah, it's time to start. It is time to go live yet another day. When they go crazy like that, I don't know in which direction it goes, but there might be some kind of correlation between those things. Maybe, maybe not. And if there isn't, I don't truly, I don't truly care then. But anyways, that's something interesting, I guess. That's the only short thing I can say so far. The only outside of our normal focus um, concept. Besides that, I guess, yeah, I have been thinking about something and I have been interested in trying to mention that here, but there is also a problem with what I want to talk about, and that is certainly I am not saying anything new. I am not explaining anything. I am not arriving to new conclusions, I guess would be a better term. And I am not, because of that same reason. What I say isn't by itself world changing, let's try to say. It is simply, in my case, an observation of things and not much more. So I I don't think that any what at the very least today of what I can uh, articulate will be new by itself, will be kind of, well, in general, it doesn't really happen that many times. I simply try to give it a more approachable explanation to most things, let's say, and I will probably say this something along those lines today too, but I feel like certainly anybody who has any degree of development in the very same fields of ideas will not even need to hear anything that I say today. To that's the point that I'm trying to reach. That I don't think it is in that sense helpful. I guess the only problem, as always, is one says that they have certain aptitudes towards something. I don't really know if it will be that understandable or not, but yeah, simply that I guess. I have been wanting to talk about it, but I also feel like it is quite a priority, a necessity to say something like that. Also, good morning bit to you too. I hope you are doing well. I hope life is good. Because life is indeed good. So I hope you are capable of showing it today. Uh, you in the stream, right? I think I haven't seen you. Yeah. I knew it. But what? You woke up early? That's okay. Vita. That's incredibly good. That's like the best thing possible. That's the only way. The only way which is truly worth it. I I am but just a lowly potato, but still incredibly amazing performance, let's say, in that sense. Wonderful. Nothing more than wonderful. But yeah, welcome. Very, very welcome. I don't know. Well, I mean, I have like 1,000 questions, like, do you even sleep enough or something like that? But that's not my role today. I don't. I shouldn't ask too much in that sense. So, anyways, here we are. Dogs? Yeah, they are starting to go crazy. Why is not just my dogs, every single dog in the neighbor neighborhood is going silence? Okay, nothing, nothing happened. I guess I don't know. The reactions of these animals is quite puzzling to me. I don't understand why they act so much in groups and out of nowhere decide to stay so silent sometimes. Anyways, uh, I thank God I am not a behavior. Yet again, noise? What's going on? Thank God I am not a behavioralist because I wouldn't get it at all. All three of my dogs now? Ah, man, I will need to go and. Okay, I will go and tell them to make some beautiful silence. Give me 1 minute. I. Yeah, it is. No? They made it by themselves. They they made it by themselves. Okay, okay. I guess I okay, completely okay. What? I guess I. But yeah. Anyways, then if they want to remain silent, no more problems so far. So I was trying to say, I was trying to properly start after I don't know, like 1 minute of saying, yeah, this one in particular isn't anything new. I should drink some water. I haven't done that. I will probably feel drowsy if I don't. Uh, what an amazing discovery that if you don't drink water, even right as you are just waking up, you start to already feel tired. I, okay, I have a problem. I can't explain myself in other terms that isn't in something like video games, but there is this funny thing in many games as a mechanic that you go to sleep and you recover the sleep bar, but you lose both on food and hydration. The very same thing in real life. That happens, and you need to replenish both. And I forgot to drink water, so yeah, give me a second. Thank you. Anyways, so I think I don't have any more excuses this time. Um, we can properly get into the topic. We can get particularly into the topic. I guess, yeah. I have still one more excuse. I wanted to simply talk about it. I don't feel like explaining this time around because conceptually speaking, it is an incredibly long explanation in terms of different ideas and connections that are realized in the plane itself of concepts, and I don't like to spend 80% of the time silent. When I explain something with some visual help, I do so because I know that I can, at the very least, have like 1 or 2 minutes explaining everything that I said and continue talking after that. Here, I I guess I will simply connect the stuff to a certain extent. It is. I don't remember exactly the term, the correct name for that, but it is something along the lines of, in the way of theorizing, everybody needs to unite their different views and their different understandings about the theories that they are observing, and for the sake of doing that, you need to put together the different ideas in a more comprehensible, yeah, kind of path for yourself to not lose your own your own points in terms of what you understand. And it is something along those lines. Nothing really new, nothing really different. That is also why certainly I hope it is to any degree understandable to somebody else. I I will try to not make it so complex. I don't think it is complex, but it certainly is very subject to the perceptions of oneself and almost nothing else, sadly. Anyways, no more excuses. Let me start. I have been, since some days ago, I have been. Shut the fuck up, Beta. Ah, I have been, since some days ago, having this type of conversation with different people. First, it happened with a friend, and after that, it happened also with my family, that we had a conversation of this sort in which the topic of how complex it is for the average person to try and think in any kind of way is more and more the norm. And I think at this point it has become quite an appropriate term, something along the lines of the contemplative life, having a life that also accepts part of the act of contemplation itself has become quite a rare thing and has become quite an impossible event to observe in the average person. But this by itself doesn't mean that it is quite quite an undoable task, let's say, or something that nobody has the possibility ever of experiencing. It simply goes along the lines of, at the very least, that is the explanation that I myself can find. Um, in the modern world, you have so many other things to worry about that you might as well not even try to occupy yourself with a more abstract plane of ideas, since the present can offer you so many other more seemingly impactful worries to use your time in, and more objective in the term of pure, of the purest degree of physical things, more objective worries also. All of those things are offered in the present, while on the other hand, something aching to the act of contemplation has always been tied to the act of simply observing ideas. The problem is certainly you have later on better. Yeah, a lot of philosophers have done quite a good job in explaining something along the lines of, even then, in contemplation, you are not, or you shouldn't be only worried about the ideas themselves. The objective of contemplation isn't simply to have ideas for the sake of having ideas. The necessity of contemplation should derive to any kind of proper action later on, based on the understanding to which you are capable of arriving, certainly. And for most people, it isn't really normal even to begin to rationalize why thinking to in any minimal degree, mm, thinking can become something useful. As is it so common to be more attracted to what is already presented and argued by itself as something useful. It can even go as far as to. I remember hearing this. Yeah, I loved it. I don't remember where, but somewhere in the path of learning, there was this idea of in the world, you also start to experience something quite funny. That is, the more you evolve as a society, the more you also develop different types of habits and false necessities in order to justify the way in which you act, let's say, and all of those things become so normal to after a certain point that it is for the normal person the most recurrent thing to never try to even stop and contemplate on those things. It simply is the reality that most struggle with the possibility even of thinking and finding a proper reason to make something that has always been part of the life itself that any single person can have. Because I don't like the proposition even of we have been manipulated to believe that it is something rare. I don't think it has ever been the case. There has there has been many attempts that is different from the reality of we never had a time in which it was predicated for everybody the necessity of thinking for themselves by themselves. It has never been part of this world. And I might go even as far as to say that, and if we are trying to argue something like that, there is no better time for such an argument than the modern day in which we have lost so many connections with what is the social structure that exists around so many of us, and we have even found enough reasons to self isolate and stop being so much a creature of society, and despite the obvious needs of that, we are in the present more than ever quite capable of doing something of that sort, and we are quite gifted with the possibility of thinking in that very same sense. I don't I don't conceive any other time in which it is or in which it has been easier to have a free range of ideas compared to the modern era. Obviously, there are. It doesn't mean that it has been harder to simply think. It goes more along the lines of now you can do it with more freedom, simply because you have by default access to more information, which allows you to later on theorize if you wish to, but mostly it means that you can start to understand what is around you before even moving to anything else. So yeah, that's kind of a main point in that sense. It also has some other things, but I don't know. I I simply observe that as the reality. And once again, as I was trying to say, I don't think we have ever made a good enough argument for something along the lines of how necessary it has become or it could be conceived the project of adding more and more time for contemplation in life towards what is the nature of reality and what's not. Because sadly, in general terms, any kind of ideology that tries to predicate this fails to propose such a concept as it is simply staying in the ground of necessities that they are also presenting. Like, in my time, I can only resort to examples, but in my time reading, be it Aristotle's or Marx, both of them, or in general, most of the older people, like Socrates and Marcus Aurelius, Plato, all of that people talk about the necessity of contemplation for the sake of a political life. They are ignoring the other kind of benefit that it brings, and I kind of even mentioned that before. One of the main statements of this type of um, philosopher slash political figure was your your philosophy should only exist to the degree to which it later on can ensure that you dedicate to any kind of political action based on the conclusions that you can take. And something like that has been closer, I think, so far to a proper explanation as to why it is helpful. But I don't, yeah, without making it seem like it is the worst, I simply can't enjoy what is being said in those terms. When you forget about the capacity of enjoyment that exists by default on anybody for any kind of subject in terms of even inside of something like the contemplation slash philosophy, you have the possibility always of observing what is good. And once again, in the modern era, you have the possibility of enjoying so many things that almost cater exactly to your needs, to your interests. You don't need to lose time hearing somebody who goes completely against you if you don't want to. You have no obligation to do something like that, and you have no real reason to even begin to justify or something of that sort. Uh, what is the discovery of somebody else's ideas and whatnot? You can only do what you can see as interesting at that. And the problem inside of that is, once again, kind of trying to trace it back before talking about simply philosophy. More often than not, the present world presents to you so many ideas about what could be an interest that you don't even stop to wonder for yourself if what you are starting to admire so much is truly something that you care about. But it also means, sadly, later on, that the moment in which you start to take control of such an apparatus given to you, you realize not only that you're immersed in many problematic fields that never truly gave you any benefit, but also you start to deal with the consequences of I have the complete freedom, while at the same time the shackles of I need or I can do what I feel like doing. And if it isn't possible for anybody who begins to even theorize or desire, even, I don't think it goes along the lines of theory. I would even say, when you mention theories, you're already moving into a more advanced plane of I, I have I have reached conclusions. That is a proper theory. When you're simply starting to think by yourself, you're moved by desire. You have simply wishes and aspirations, let's say, as always. Nothing else can really justify the act of reading or whatnot. And it is then, as I was trying to say, in that same line, that sadly, it becomes so common for everybody to not have the capacity of justifying the whole journey. Because even more, with the highest degree of information available in terms of, yeah, in any kind of political terms and philosophical terms, most of that, if not all, in terms of quantity, doesn't truly change the individual itself. It simply introduces brick by brick layers of information that are later on used for posterior theorizing capacities. And it assumes that the individual has the capacity to make theory out of what they are discovering, which by itself might not be bad, because certainly there is nothing better than to not treat who you have in front of you as somebody lesser than you. It is quite a wonderful discovery, even, to give others the possibility of never losing out of their own sight what is it that they can discover, let's say, out of the different things that are in front of them for themselves. That makes sense. But the problem is, or it isn't even one problem. That is, the real problem, I guess, will be that it isn't just one problem. To begin with, you need to learn too much. I will say too much based on how we have such a necessity for time and whatnot. Nobody's really interested in committing so much of their life to something like the pursuit of knowledge. It is understandable. It is quite a risky play to make. There are other things that this world presents to you that seem to be more rewarding. After all, you don't know what you can gain fully by yourself, and there is nothing to truly gain if you have never even experienced something truly along the lines of what your imaginary capacities, let's say, or more mental capacities can bring to you. It's quite impossible for anybody, in that very same sense, to experience something like that. And it only comes with enough time. And once again, nobody's really willing to commit so much of their time. And even the most basic degree of this experience only comes after, I don't know, having read two or three books, five, you don't start to make up theory based on the first space that you read that satisfies you. There is also, in that very same place, there is something quite interesting, that is, you are given the opportunity always of observing a little bit what you are at the present moment reading. there is always that chance and there is always that gift to you. You can always stop, let's say, the page in which you are and check with the rest of your understandings out the world if what is being said makes any sense to you or not. That is the common thing. But instead of that very simple process, something that very few times gets properly mentioned is you also have the possibility not just of observing, but of by comparing what you can by yourself deduce. And in this case, we're not even talking about more advanced degrees of theorizing, simply comparison and the interest or the capacity to follow what your own way of thinking deduces from that. It lets you start to make theory, but it doesn't ever truly satisfy you once again to any degree compared to what you can do once you have in your hands the complete knowledge fully observed out of anything in terms of it will never be the same thing to simply experience one page compared to reading every single text that is available from any author. And in that same sense, it happens that most people don't even have the capacity of seeing the necessity of doing something like this. And in this case, I guess I can simply mention it again. Most people don't even see a necessity in doing so because it hasn't even been justified for anybody to take such huge amounts of time in the desire for knowledge or whatnot. Sadly, it hasn't been explained like that. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say it is just there. Impossible even to make that amend, let's say. But yeah, I need, before continuing, I need like 1 second. I think I want to change scene, so anyways, I'm back. So, as I was saying, most people don't even try to stop and contemplate, sadly, and it has become more and more the norm. Even if, once again, this world allows more than ever the possibility of doing something along these lines, even if anybody has the gift more in this present era than at any other instance of history, the capacity to use their time in meaningful search of ideas, discoveries, and even more sadly, for most people, even simply meaning than ever before. I love that is accessible to most, and I don't know. On the other hand, I think it is quite a necessity to mention this. It sadly is also part of the reality that most people don't even possess the capacity to properly put the distance between somebody who has such. Okay, I think I can. I can't say it in other manner. Somebody who has 60 IQ lives the world completely different from somebody who has something like 120. And just because Most people forget about this, which we have always been doing about. So towards fixing these things and towards helping others understand things to the degree to which no matter the difference in something that has time and time again proven to be quite meaningless, something like IQ, we haven't made the proper arrangements to allow all the universe, let's say, to understand these more advanced theories. And not because, once again, that is the most magnificent thing about the problem. Not because they aren't comprehensible for everybody. Quite the contrary. The knowledge itself contained instead of many discoveries is easily displayable in front of anybody who takes their own time to contemplate to begin with what is being said and what is the meaning that can be derived from those ideas. The distillation and the by itself purification of those concepts is quite a necessary process for everybody, while at the same time something that can also be proficiently showed to the rest of the world as a discovery with a meaningful impact and with a sufficiently profound enough capacity of modification to other people and their lives, not because what you are saying is anything new compared to what came before you. In that sense, you're not taking the works of somebody else and adding to them your explanations of other concepts. You are simply synthesizing the concepts. Sadly, in language, we have too many words that refer to quite an abundant degree of ideas that are in the place of other ideas for the sake of simply, quote unquote, justifying this this way of work and what's not. And because of that, most truly believe that it can be the reality only that if or no matter how hard you try, your concepts will only be similar to those who you are consuming in terms of you can't make new stuff up or something along those lines. And it isn't the point about that. I'm not talking about that. I'm not explaining how anybody can create something new. So far, I am simply saying the capacity of understanding and the capacity of discovery for all of these things is always there, and the capacity of reaching even better degrees of comprehension is also always there. The only problem then is that most of the time we don't even have the capacity to justify such a process. And most of the time we don't even believe that it might be a necessity to do something along those lines. We don't, I wouldn't say that we don't stop to think. Most people at some point have the capacity fully to even enter completely structured and rapid lives. Even then, they have the capacity to contemplate, to abstract themselves from what is their own situation, and to think for a second, is what's happening really something that I want? Is what my life has become something that I really enjoy? And that is indeed some degree of contemplation already. That is by itself some beginnings of the process of ideas and the capacity to later on develop even better theories and whatnot. Most people don't even want to say that it looks like that it is indeed the start of something, because sadly, if the modern era has done anything correctly in this whole field of things that I have been discussing, it certainly is. Philosophy seems more like a problematic thing and a useless way to spend your time than anything else. You can't, you can't in any degree truly, truly say without expecting society itself to see it as a completely crazy proposition. You can't just come here and say, oh yeah, you know what? You should, from now on, spend the next remaining years of your life, no matter the number, reading theory and reading theorization, even that of concepts, and read even more and more concepts and arrays of ideas and see if any of that makes sense and whatnot for you. You can't simply propose that. You can certainly do it. You will gain nothing by doing so. The problem is what you need and what you are trying to obtain is a little bit past the point of simply saying, "Wow, yeah, I want to dedicate my time to something like that." It is kind of tracing back in the process of justification of things. You need to justify properly using your time so much in something that will unavoidably require patience. But once again, moving further on what I had been saying, most philosophy doesn't really explain anything new. Most ideas made by philosophers isn't in any degree something truly revolutionary. And the more you look back, the more you can realize it has never been something even mildly surprising in that sense. All of that is always con- contained inside of the realm purely, as far as we can say, of initial grounds of understanding about the rest of the nature of many things. Because certainly, sadly, philosophy, if something has been done not so correctly, is to say philosophy doesn't contain just one theory or just one field of analysis. Many things, also dogs, many things are barely explained in philosophy because, or not even because, the proper, okay, I mentioned that the proper because is simply because most philosophers simply want to explain things for the sake of explaining things. They don't even believe there might be a proper meaning. They simply wish to get done with explanations in order to move on past from the rest of things, basically. And all of that is understandable. But here is a here is what it truly means. Most ideas inside of philosophy are pure bricks for you to construct your own house of concepts later on, as they are explanations about many things that pertain to the life of anybody. Inside of many different fields, philosophy is, to a certain degree, trying to define something that has never had a proper definition. Philosophy is the science that tries to make sense out of the world. Let's say, in the most broad way, because it is also the one that allows the usage of 1,000 different theories in terms of hyperbole. Um, you can use as many theories as you wish to try and see if the comprehension that you end up arriving at later on in the world or about the world is truly, to any degree, something useful. Most people can't even begin with that understanding, and also sadly, it isn't even given because I guess it will be a failure. I wouldn't call it something else. Philosophy hasn't even done a proper job in explaining, in justifying what is contemplation. It always tries to sell to you, let's say, the idea of, yeah, you might want to simply have inside of yourself, inside of your own life, sorry, some philosophy because it changes you. That is the most radical proposition made by most philosophers. And those who don't move in that line of thinking simply state something like, oh wow, and also philosophy is quite useful um, because it helps you see the world in a different way. It is no explanation whatsoever. It helps nothing to nobody that degree of explanation, of quote unquote explanation, because it isn't even a proper one. But we are so accustomed to saying stuff like that that we have accepted it to be perceived as a sort of explanation, even. I mean, a parenthesis here. If we were talking truly about what an explanation tries to do, nobody has ever done a proper job when they simply say stuff of that sort. There are incredibly intricate ways in which philosophy has the capacity to help anybody. The problem is we have accepted, we have internalized, and we have even established that it is okay to remain in the most surface level of the ideas that anybody might have. And it is perfect for you to lose all of your life doing something that brings no tool to you, just because it can be somehow related to a philosophical endeavor. And that isn't the reality, that isn't what should truly be the message. If it tries to, in any kind of way, be helpful, if it tries to, in any kind of manner, speak to other people and move, the degree of persuasion that is lacking in all of this is certainly philosophy gives you the possibility in a more concrete manner of seeing what is your present, placing your own self into a field of comprehensive understanding about your own existence in correlation with whichever kind of justifying reason that you have found in order to move yourself towards that which you say you aspire to reach. And it doesn't mean, in this sense, that what philosophy does is give you a meaning. Philosophy isn't a way of having some belief in the world. I am losing the word. Theology, I think it is. Philosophy isn't basically a belief, but rather, that is, I guess, the funny thing. To a certain degree, I don't like to say it because it is incredibly vapid, but every belief is by itself a philosophy. That that's the that's the problem with saying something like that. Most people don't even have the capacity to justify the beginning of such an adventure, and you expect many to even care. It is quite impossible for anybody to really find themselves in even better places of understanding about things if all of that doesn't really lead to conclusions and whatnot. And in that sense, I have already explained it. Philosophy doesn't do a proper show, but it has potential in all of that. And I guess, yeah, I will say certainly the capacity of using your time in something that can make the rest of your time better can indeed be called something useful and can indeed be called something of a high quality or of an enhancing quality at the very least. Because certainly, I won't lie in that sense, most of the propositions made by mere thinking are quite contrary to nature and even more in the most well known ways of thinking about the world. What you find most of the time is ways of thinking and philosophers who propose theories against their main structures of seeing the world. You can only. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to. I don't like to give examples. At this point, I don't feel like giving examples because I know that certainly they might go outside of what has been so far something quite understandable without the need of them. Something along the lines of, I guess, in a meta analysis, you could even say my main point, my main focal way of going out this one particular speech is the problems of not having philosophy. It is a problematization, I think it is called, of how lacking philosophy does so many negative things to individuals, while at the same time arguing constantly against its very same thing. That is what you find the most inside of philosophy, and that's what most people who have never even tried to read philosophy end up believing. You have a lot of authors who don't talk about such things in negative manners. I am. It is quite a wonderful adventure, even to discover that those who by the populace are perceived as incredibly negative, philosophers have made only positive counter arguments towards what are the most in the mainstream known theories. And this doesn't come to light until you decide by yourself to pick up a book, let's say, and start analyzing what is contained inside of that. But, and here is the funny thing, here is something that has been failing to be said so far, that is an incredibly big problem of the modern way in which we even begin to study philosophy. To have a proper understanding about theories, and this is in general, you need to observe everything that also created this theory in terms of you. I think human discoveries will I guess at the very least there I can use an example. You can understand the creation of penicillin only after you understand how it was an incredibly random event, something that might as well never happened, but by pure chance it ended up becoming the reality of said thing. There are many instances in which the surroundings explain what came before, and the problem is in most of the present theory, in most of the observable ideas, what you have is philosophers who take from older philosophers different pieces to keep on constructing, tracing back to what I mentioned before. Just like oneself does, even the most advanced philosophers are not devoid of the nature of, by the construction of even better theories, you keep advancing and advancing towards any particular objective that you have. And this is to such a degree so that if you were to take your time enough, you will discover that by reading the oldest theories available and later on moving to what have slowly but surely become the present until you are in the modern era, certainly, all of that is built upon what came before it. There is nothing of any substantial existence, at the very least, that is by itself something revolutionary or something, yeah, something that is talking outside of the box, let's say. There isn't something of that nature in philosophy. You're not. Once again, the most important works are not outside of what anybody can understand. The only problem is we do not make enough of an effort to tell others how necessary it is to previously perform that whole travel of, yeah. And if you're trying to reach this one thing, if you're trying to read this one thing, before all of that, you should also try to read this and this other book, and you should also try to see ideas in this one light, and you should try to keep on exploring the paths of discoveries that are also presented by this other philosopher, and all of those things later on that are not only that are from one philosopher, but in general that happen all around, all of those things end up influencing the others who came or who will come after them, who will appear after them, and who, if you are interested in, will later on get easier to understand them based simply on the adoption of their theories and the utilization of what has been previously displayed by their predecessors. There is something akin to the ancestral ways in which we have observed the world that comes from philosophy itself. You can't, if you are if you are hearing this, okay, if you're hearing this just because you have an interest in philosophy, you will never understand philosophy as a whole without seeing that not only it is made up, I have already said, the idea itself that is pursued by the philosopher, the things that surround them in the present, but in the plane of ideas, those other concepts which also showed the path to this philosopher, which for them were perceived as contemporary, because in the gift of a book, you can find yourself immersed in a conversation or hearing a monologue from somebody who lived thousands of years ago. For them, they are conceived as contemporary. But for us, it is necessary to do a proper discovery of their ways of thinking, a proper analysis of what leads to later theories, and a proper traceable path to follow in order of concepts. Because that history of philosophy allows you to have an incredibly easier time later on to deal even with the most modern era ideas, even with most of them. It allows you to be capable of understanding such a nature of things, I will say. But I don't. I guess here is where the problem starts. Most people don't even believe that it is necessary to immerse yourself, and suddenly that most of the older ideas end up falling off because let's say something. Okay, I think a made up example would be if you live in a world in which in present times it is seen as okay to, yeah, to use electricity for your daily life, you have no necessity to discover things that pertain to the usage of something like the wind, like the water, like any other resource to fuel your existence. And most people know this. Most people are capable of saying that this is a very well known concept. You're not going to spend your time observing something like that. And the explanation is quite obvious. You don't do it because it doesn't change the present. It in no way helps you, benefits you to spend your whole life discovering how something was used before purely for the sake of discovering it. There are obviously different ways in which later on this can be argued as something useful. If you have later on theories, if you have later on, or not even later on, if you have by the capacity of perception of your own self, the manners to produce a good enough argument to justify the pursuit of older knowledge to see if what was being in that time. In this realm of this example, if the water that was being used before still had other potentials, which you in the present can observe, it means that you can spend your time doing that. It means that it is a reasonable thing. But more often than not, nobody gains nothing if they pursue knowledge in such a way. And nobody truly gains nothing because it is an incredibly useless endeavor. And that it is already by itself something understandable. Nobody wants to see the rest of the humanity lose themselves in meaningless things. That's the basic theory that seems to be tied to how we interact with philosophy. But the reality is, even the most modern ideas have a problem with philosophy in that regard. That is, the oldest philosophers started to define the world, started to explain what was in a long of different fields. And all of these fields later on came to be their own sciences, even. That is something quite wonderful, I think. I will certainly say one of the many gifts of philosophy has been the capacity to create new sciences. In older times, it was a lot easier. In the present, it is quite an impossible task, as we have already, at least from our present perspective, we have reached many degrees of comprehensions about many fields that are in no way expandable on. Therefore, new fields of science are becoming harder and harder, but for most, if almost not all, it happens that you, in philosophy, see how tracing back to this idea of a house, of brick by brick, the concepts presented by previous philosophers, the theorizations made by those who came before, start to enable you to understand the rest of things. I guess I should say it here before continuing, because it is obviously the only incredibly bad negative point about this. Even if they use the same concepts, philosophy is an incredibly bad field in terms of allowing or regulating people and their different terminologies. Nobody should try to, in any way, believe that philosophy is easy to follow because they always used the very same terminology. What you find in some as the spirit, you will find in others as the anima, and what you find in some as an idea of methods of production, and later on means of living, can very well be driving forces in another philosopher. And all of these different terms are still the very same thing, despite how incredibly different they are when mentioned. Even the ideas themselves that sometimes appear when you say something is nowhere near what is the definition itself used by the philosopher. That is the that is, if you are trying to read philosophy, the main problem is Nobody truly recognizes that what they're doing is based on other, yeah, on other concepts. The only problem with this ends up being that the founding steps made by someone might not be so deep once you realize that what they are saying has a lot of influence of other philosophies. And in the main branches, in the most popular one and whatnot, that is a given. You will find out that what you learned before in somebody who came 3,000 years ago, before the present author which you are reading, was talking about the exact same definition with a different word on its place than what is being discussed on by this present author. And I guess the necessity to have accolades to our own names makes it so easy for anybody to make up new terms and utilize the tools of language to make others believe that they finally reached an incredibly astounding new discovery that isn't a reality. Everything that is present, or that presently is famous at the very least, takes inspiration from other things, everything in the realm of philosophy. You can try to hide it, you can try to say that it doesn't happen. You gain nothing if you believe that by hindering your own work, that way you can truly have any kind of benefit. Most people, in that sense, haven't even heard about such a thing, and that is why, even sadly, philosophy seems so complex, because every single philosopher, when you are haven't realized this, has their own dictionary, and every single philosopher has their own way of referring to things. But most of them don't create anything new. Once you find out about enough people who are of a very similar nature, you start to finally put into its place that certainly the theories proposed by others are more than good enough to move towards the rest and to allow yourself to see all that also is the descendancy of those ideas in an easier light, because the concepts, even if the words that make them up are changed, the concepts remain the same. And that is the most useful part about this particular knowledge in philosophy. That you can, no matter what you're observing, you can keep up your own understanding about the reality, your own comprehension about the theories that you're observing for all, well, yeah, with whichever intention that you have, really. And all of that leads only to an even better comprehension if you stop worrying so much about what it means exactly, the word that is being said, in terms of being capable mentally of holding inside of you a dictionary for every single exact terminology used. Sadly, it doesn't work that way, philosophy. Most, if this, in the present era, everything, in the older times, most and only in the beginnings of philosophy, partially works were incredibly influenced by everything else. But yeah, I think I spent too much time on that one point. continuing on what I was trying to say before, going back, tracing back into what was the real main point of this. Why would you even wish to do it? Okay, it is, we have already established so far that it can be easier to do so if you realize finally that indeed you gain the possibility of learning so much easily things. You can very very much have an easier time discovering and considering ideas rather than never even trying to see what they contain. And philosophy presents to anybody who is willing many ways in which also the actions of their life can seem to be justified based simply on the ways in which they interact with the rest, let's say. I think so. Also, good morning, Savannah. I don't know how long have I been talking. Okay, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Let me drink some water. Finally, I can stop. Give me 1 second. I want to drink something before I pass out almost. I didn't. I got too lost into what I was saying. I am sorry. Anyways, yeah, that's what I was basically arguing. The main utility of philosophy ends up being that it allows you to understand things in a more meaningful way because it lets you arrive to your own conclusions. And the problem inside of this proposition is that many times we try to debate what is inside and what is outside of the realms of philosophy. I am not discussing that, I am simply saying if you can invite a little bit more what gives to your life philosophy, you can discover indeed that it becomes a tool for the rest of your existence as it allows many other things to be put into its proper place based merely on the perceptions that are made by those ideas. And even if you never tried to give it such an aim, I guess, you can gain the possibility once you begin to observe, or simply at the very least, with the spirit of enmity with this concept, even if you try to see how this is not the case, you discover later on that it was indeed something useful to do, and indeed something potentially beneficial for anybody to do. I, I, I don't know if I can surely say I can ensure that. The problem is everybody has their own discovery of how to read all of these things and how to keep nurturing their own ways of thinking. So sadly, most people don't even have the capacity to reach a conclusion like this because even more, once again, sadly, you are forcing yourself to read somebody who is incredibly hard, not because they are presenting anything new. Modernity never presented anything new by itself. The problem is you are not realizing that you needed to comprehend so many other older stuff to be capable of arguing anything mildly close to what came afterwards. That you hinder your own path, you hinder your own experience in learning. When you say that, wow, yeah, I can't now, I have lost the possibility of discovering anything. I have lost the chance of getting what was the point. No, sadly, I guess incredibly sadly, philosophy isn't something possible to get. It is just a task that requires time and kind of tracing back to the beginning, because this was a discussion that I had been having with multiple people. It means nothing to believe that it will take 50 years or centuries for one single human being to understand every single idea inside of philosophy. It means absolutely nothing to say that. If you haven't even tried to get the beginnings of it, because if there is something wonderful about living in this very same moment, is that not only you have the very own text that were made by them, the most fidedign translations also, but also you are given synthesis after synthesis of those very same authors by other people who simply try to shorten their discoveries and make it even more accessible for other people. There is, in that same sense, there has never been a better time than the present moment for anybody to discover philosophy and for anybody to try and submerge themselves on what philosophy has to offer. If you can't give yourself it I don't like to say time, because time means something long, something incredibly exhausting to a certain degree. If there is something quite wonderful, we don't understand time if it isn't in the extension of itself in the whole universe. I don't mean time. You don't need a decade to find a meaning in philosophy. In 1 week, if you try to read, if you give yourself the opportunity to read somebody, you discover truly what can be useful for the rest of your existence in 1 week of trying to learn. Certainly, it is tiresome, but it is the only kind of pleasurable pain that can be felt inside of the brain, because to a certain degree, philosophy can very much be equaled to the exercise of the mind itself, performed by others and with others, because you are given the ideas, the concepts that were already observed by the rest, and now you are given the possibility of seeing if it is understandable for you. And when it becomes understandable enough, you are also gifted the chance of using it later on in any kind of way that you want. And that is what doesn't happen enough times. That is what doesn't happen to a substantial degree. That we can't even start to justify it, to make it understandable and to make it something as wonderful as what it truly is. I even remember in in this very same part of a discussion with my with a family member. Let's leave it at that. I was talking, and they said something along the lines of somebody was also talking about something similar, and we had to watch it because it was quite interesting. And people seems to get offended. People seems to get angry at this. And certainly the point isn't the anger. It is the indignation of how how bad we have done the work of explaining the wonders of doing something like this, how incredibly disappointing it can be to see even that out of nowhere philosophy is something problematic to follow, something annoying to have. You don't realize how much you are hindering your own existence if you don't even try to consider what are the things around you. How can you live in a world in which nothing makes sense ever if you're out of nowhere incapable of even beginning to give it a minimal shape? And it allows you, it isn't even just philosophy. Oh wow, yeah, you should do a career on philosophy. It isn't about that. The message is not that. The point is we have incredibly important works. We have treatises on humanity. We have discoveries that pertain to the human soul itself that can make everything else that comes after that more meaningful. And nobody is capable of even saying something like that because, oh no, it might be too much to say. It might contain too much information. It might be too hard to get. How can you even say something like that if you want to be of any kind of importance to others? How can you believe that it makes sense to say, oh yeah, you know what? Don't try it. Don't pick up a book. It is going to be hard. What are you even talking about when you say something along those lines? If you can realize so easily how wonderful it is to even try to process what is being gifted to you by somebody who spent decades trying to make things better for the rest of the world, merely based on the observations that anybody can have. And that is a work that anyone can do, indeed. And that should be incredibly encouraged. And that should be incredibly normal to have in life. It isn't something that disappeared because it was bad to try. It is something that simply is exhausting. And in a world in which, out of nowhere, discomfort is the enemy, it simply disappears like everything else, which might represent the possibility of an even better degree of pleasure, an even more meaningful degree of pleasure in existence. It is the very same thing as with something like physical exercise. You don't realize how important it is until you find yourself almost dying because you neglected it. I don't know. I think that's the point. I guess. I hope that's the point. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I guess I don't know. I I know that I haven't screaming. That's why I wanted to stop. Thank you. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I will drink some water. I have 10 more minutes before I have to leave. So we still have time. Let me drink some water. Thank you. I guess I guess that's basically what I wanted to say. I wanted to finally say it properly because I mentioned that and I didn't finish explaining this visual concept of philosophy gives you simply bricks. It gives you one after another bricks. You need to build up things with that and you need to use it in any meaningful manner. Most people believe that it is impossible to do so, but if you give it a possibility, you discover that indeed most, if not all of what is being said in some authors is quite influential and quite capable of once again letting you live a more comfortable life. Because sadly, even if what gets discussed is dark, the stories themselves made by those authors are by nature quite useful and quite interesting also to behold. It simply is a transmission of knowledge that happens in a more direct manner because most thinkers don't believe they need to force it. Therefore, they give up on the possibility of telling you straight to your face what then is so important. And that is why sometimes even something so incredibly obvious like the necessity of being alive is lost. Because even in something that tries to attain its very own existence to the help of the human soul or any other kind of definition of the sort, is incapable of properly stating its own usefulness, and it only hinders itself and everybody who might get benefited by such a thing. But it is a matter of simply giving it a possibility, and it certainly is useful. It certainly is a wonderful thing. But there is there is no explanation possible to explain how much it allows you. It enables the rest of yourself to be. It is, I guess I can say something along the lines of every single human soul has a potential. Something that is quite wonderful about how philosophy enables you is that this potential gets more and more brought to reality the moment in which you start to understand your own very nature as a human being, and you start to see everything else that also comes with that as something lesser of a problem and more of an intrinsically potentially beneficial thing. Most of the time, the tools that are being given to you by different philosophers are only discoveries that allow you to experience the rest of this whole existence as something magnificently beautiful, but it can't be discovered by others for you, even if indeed what you're receiving when you read somebody is already what they understand. You can only receive the knowledge that is inherited to your own hands through the analysis itself of what is being presented. And it is a task that requires patience because sometimes what gets said is incredibly hard to decipher, but at the same time, it is more than rewarding because, in this very same manner of potential, it allows you to slowly perceive your own potential. It is in its final analysis, it becomes one of the most enabling tools for any individual because it shows you what is the possibilities that anybody have. And it isn't about faith itself, it is about the comprehension in a more rational way. It isn't an explanation about the nature in, in an unnecessary manner. It is the proper value and the proper capacity to put that thing into its own place of value that nothing else can offer you. And I will repeat that because I don't like that it intrinsically appears in my mind as a noise. And no, philosophy isn't belief. Every belief can be some sort of philosophy, but philosophy isn't a belief system. It means that you can even conceal to your religious ideas some degree of philosophical inclination, but most people are not even willing to go to that plane of understandment. So sadly, trying to give it that structure is by default quite bad. But yeah, that's 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 basically it. I guess that's what I wanted to say. Uh, I think so. I hope I didn't forget anything. Yeah, I think that's on one hand, the problem is you never know if you have said enough or not. To a certain degree, it is almost impossible to say enough because you discover that there are always things in which you can expand, and there are always things that can be furthermore developed in the very same manner in which I was talking about saying how you can realize that what gets presented to you is or could potentially be useful. In that very manner, it happens sadly that the potential explanations that come afterwards are even better. But we have to settle down with what we were capable of doing so far right now and nothing else, I guess. One of the beautiful problems of existence that there isn't enough time to do every single thing that you wish. You might accomplish quite a lot, but you also need to accept that it will unavoidably happen. There will be, even in the final day of your existence, there will be something that you want to have the capacity of doing based purely on you can't you can't in any way do something that is so incredibly complex, something that is by nature so incredibly hard to find meaningful, I guess. But yeah, that's that's everything. I have nothing else to really say. I have I have run out of time. That's the biggest problem. I have run out of time today. So yeah, uh, that's it. I don't know. I guess we should rate. I choice paralysis, my beloved. I guess I haven't. If I have to think, I think I haven't read more in quite a while. Probably there. Probably. Yeah. I think so. But anyways, I hope in any manner. As always, something of this sort is always worrisome because you truly don't know if it is understandable for the rest. For me, it is fully understandable, but I don't know if it is of the very same nature to the rest. And not. I guess that's the worst part of this. I don't say it because oh my god, I am so clear. No, isn't it that obvious? Isn't it that incredibly evident what I'm saying? Am I really saying something hard? I don't. I hope it isn't in any way something that can't be understood by the rest. I gain nothing if it is really impossible to get, but anyways, ah, completely anyways. No more worrying, please. Life is to be enjoyed. So, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for lurking. Thanks for everything. As always, it has been yet another incredibly prosperous day, event, opportunity. It has, as always, given the possibility of thinking and allowed us to be here and enjoy what are the fruits of observation and mostly contemplation. So, yeah, even more today, please. Try to have some contemplation in your life, but mostly, as always, already, be happy, have meaning, have something good, have those things which feel nice and pursue them if they are indeed good. Anyways, as always, thanks. And whenever we can, we're getting back here. This time for real, then we have Harata next time, whenever. And yeah, have a nice one. Until that next opportunity comes, because right now it is simply time to live. Where Mo, who is doing a little company collab, nothing else to add. Thanks. Goodbye. Uh, Enjoy life, I guess. Also, this channel is rated for mature audiences. What?